Vanakkam and welcome to Sudarshan's podcast. I'm Sudarshan, the host. Today I have Raghav Kumar, who is the head of marketing at Beacon.li. He been So he done marketing at very technically heavy products, right? Beacon.li. Before this, he was working for Locus. And if you look at his career portfolio, you'll find companies who are into data or anything very technical in nature. So, yep, I think hope this podcast won't be technical or jargony. Hey, Raghav, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sudarshan. So yeah, I think a part of what you said is true. So I am a bit of a nerd myself, so I enjoy tinkering, which kind of explains the choice of companies that I work with. But yeah, I think my entire career has been built in SaaS. There have been some companies which are more B2B to C as well. So there are companies like View.ai and CleverTap where they were built on AI, but a lot more consumer focused. So there were you could actually see the results of whatever we were building, not so much behind the scenes. But yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, Raghav is someone I know. We spoke a month back. He was in US back then. It was a very interesting chat. 20 minutes. I was like totally listening to him. And yeah. So one of the things I really like about Beaconly is it is emerging category, right? So to give listeners idea or context about Beaconly, which is agentic implementation platform. So for example, Salesforce have their implementation partners across the globe, but still a lot of things are manual. But when it comes to platforms like Beaconly, that simplifies this and make things more efficient. If I'm wrong, correct me, Raghav. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I think so basically there are a lot of tools out there that are kind of helping with the project management of the implementation phase. So you have a very established category called professional services automation. Now, PSA or professional services automation as a term was coined almost 30 years ago when the definition of automation was very different. So since that term was taken, which is why we have to get creative with it, but essentially, what we're doing is that so usually what ESA tools do is sort of look at automate the project management of the implementation projects. Where we kind of get involved is the actual execution. So, imagine agents that get on requirements gathering calls, turning those into BRDs, using those BRDs to actually configure those enterprise SaaS tools, then sort of also creating, custom test cases, so the UAT is also kind of handled by the AI agents, and then eventually taking it to production or going live. And then we also have additional modules that kind of take care of support, post implementation support, things like that. So I think that's my elevator pitch.
Who do you sell to, Raghav? Because there are PS leaders,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, PS leaders report to CS sometimes. They report to tech sometimes. But yeah, how this
Yeah.
works.
So this one's a little tricky because it also depends on the kind of scale that the company is in. So in a lot of more early stage SaaS companies, customer success teams have the dual role of, managing retention, but at the same time also handling the implementations. But in the larger enterprise software companies, you have a specific professional services team. More often than not, they kind of report into a chief customer officer, at the CXO level. So that's usually who we sell to, and that's usually our buyer.
Got it. Cool. So yeah, when it comes to, I think if I'm not wrong, you call yourself agentic orchestration implementation platform or something that sorts, if I'm not
Yeah, so agentic orchestration for enterprise implementations.
right.
It's still a work in progress. I think we are also kind of evolving as we go along. I think it's always sort of day zero. So we're kind of, it's always a work in progress. But I think what we've realized is that AI orchestration for implementation, so sorry, AI platform for enterprise implementations has a nice ring to it. So that's,
Yeah. It's nice, but when are we? I mean, if our ACV is north of 50K, Magic Quadrant plays a huge role. And if the category is called by, I mean, Beaconly calls it something and a competitor A calls it something else, when are we going to the Magic Quadrant? How Magic Quadrant plays in this era?
yeah. So I think, in fact, like of late, I've been having a lot of conversations with analysts
Analyst.
across Gartner, Forrester, and there's another, analyst advisory firm. What we've realized is that it's almost like a category creation play for us, because we don't typically fall into any of the categories that they have cleanly. So what we need to do is kind of draw analogies between, let's say, a professional services automation tool, and tell them exactly what our differentiators are. Sort of look at workflow automation as well, because there are certain elements of workflow automation that we're doing, but we're a lot more, special purpose, in the sense that we're focused more on enterprise implementations. So yeah, I think where it gets tricky is when you're sort of first at doing anything, and then Gartner kind of has conversations with you, and then they try and figure out if there's actually enough depth in that market to kind of build a magic quadrant out of it. So in fact, even with professional services automation, or PSA, it's been a category that's been around for almost 30 years, but they still don't have a magic quadrant for it. What they have is the next year, which is like a market guide. So even with Gartner, you typically have different tiers. So you'll have the magic quadrant, which is the most mature sort of category. Then you have the market guides, and then you have the cool vendor reports, which is code for, yeah, we don't have a clean category for this yet.
Okay. Okay. So where Beacon.li comes in there?
So I think currently we'd be a better candidate for something like a cool vendor at this point.
Right.
But yeah,
So what about, I mean, who are the top players who's doing some north of 50, 100 billion in the same space, and where they are placed? Are they in the magic quadrant, or are they in the market guide, or?
so I think currently, because it's still very early, so most of the conversations that we've had with Gartner, in fact, the interesting thing is the minute they see the product, they're usually wowed by whatever we've built. And the general response is that we've never seen something like this before. So there
Okay.
are folks who are doing parts of what we're doing. So
Right.
in fact, there are PSA companies that are becoming a lot more agentic, but most of their work is kind of limited to sort of getting in on those inception or the kickoff calls, and documenting those requirements, but not so much on kind of managing the configurations themselves. So ours is, it sort of goes from requirements gathering, to configuration, to testing, to go lives, and then even the post implementation support. So the end to end piece is something that's not been cracked by any company, at least in my knowledge. So I think, which is why they're also kind of having a hard time figuring out which category this can sort of fit in. But
I mean, whenever you talk to customer, right? Because the way you put yourself matters. Are you, I mean, will you say them that, hey, we are a PSA but agentic, or we are this company but agentic? They are a legacy. How do you put yourself, Raghav, there?
so I
Because
think,
it's been a year now. You might have had this conversations a lot inside company whenever you get on a sales call. But yeah, just want to understand the depth of the way you want to put yourself out, the way you want to
sure.
stand out. Yeah.
Sure. So in fact, when we started off, right, so it sort of started off as this tool, or this platform that can convert any sort of system of record, which is like your ERPs and CRMs, right, into a system of execution. So, it kind of works on any system of record and can make it agentic. So it's almost like a AIify your product kind of a pitch. But again, that's, it's great to kind of build it top of the funnel, but not doesn't necessarily result in a lot of conversions at the bottom of the funnel, because there are a lot of players who are trying to crack that space. Secondly, there you can't directly show value. So you can't put a dollar number to the fact that I like my user was able to do something in with just one prompt instead of clicking 10 times. So it's harder to kind of validate that with, like, let's say, a dollar value or something like that. So we started looking at implementation as a space. We felt that it was a problem that a lot of our customers were facing, and then we decided to kind of dig deeper into it, and that's how it kind of started. But I think when we talk about the value also, one thing that helps is the fact that professional services as a function is still very underserved. So
Hmm.
especially when it comes to making their lives easier. So you do have these project management tools, the PSA platforms and things like that. But I think in terms of the execution, or even kind of resolving, age old problems like, tribal knowledge and codifying it, have not really been taken up by companies yet. So when we
Got it.
actually show some of this, it helps. The other thing that we actually started with was kind of saying that, give us access to your product, give us like a demo instance of your product, and we can actually give you a working prototype or a working POC on your
Wow.
product within 7 days.
Awesome.
So, and that's so basically the proof of the pudding is in the eating, to use a
Yeah.
cliche, and that's definitely helped us, especially kind of shorten some of our sales cycles. So I worked with a lot of enterprise technology companies, but the sheer speed of at which we're able to go from, let's say, a demo or a discovery call to an actual closure at the kind of ticket sizes that we're looking at is phenomenal. I haven't seen this anywhere else, and which is what also excited me about it.
Right. Interesting. Yep. Okay, yeah, we spoke about Beacon.li. And I mean, one of the things I want to touch there is you told me that when someone search for Beacon, there is this another SaaS company called Beacons.ai shows up there. And of course, you want to stand out there, at least in the meta title there. And also, since it's a different platform that kind of caters a lot of audience, their volume of working at something and yours is totally different. You want to go nail down. Maybe, I mean, I would prefer, I would say, ideally, you would not focus more than 10K people to visit your website, but not the same case for them. In that case, I mean, what happened? Like, how did you stand out, or like, how do you convince your leadership that okay, it's okay to be second in the SERP, not a problem at all? What happened?
Sure. So I think what has also happened is, I think there's a major challenge with disambiguation when you have a relatively more common name, right? Now we are we call ourselves Beacon internally, and sometimes when we introduce ourselves to customers, also we call ourselves Beacon. What we realized was that there are times when people just assume that your URL, because we are an AI company, our URL would be beacon.ai, when in
Yeah,
fact it's
yeah,
actually beacon.li. So what would end up happening is that people would search for beacon.ai, and they would end up getting results. Especially when you think about LLMs, they would get results for something called beacons.ai, which is a LinkedIn bio sort of a tool. So a lot of times you would get incorrect information. In fact, there was a report that we were featured in, and something that we was worth celebrating. But I think for the longest time there was like a mail thread going on between me and the publishers, trying to get the logo corrected, because they searched for Beacon AI and they
right,
ended up getting the incorrect logo. So we had to
right.
get that corrected. Then they said, okay, it's already gone to print, but then we had to kind of figure out workarounds and stuff like that. So yeah, things like that happen. A couple of ways that we figured out how to kind of fix this is, making sure that when we are actually talking about ourselves, or even if, let's say, if there are any sort of third party articles that reference us, ensuring or building processes around making sure that we are using the complete name, right? So instead
Mm,
of using Beacon in places, making sure that we're using beacon.
yes.
So, in fact, interestingly, beacon.li was, li was is short for light, because which is
Mhm.
basically the alternate meaning for beacon, and that sort of slowly started becoming our identity. In fact,
Got it.
and this is not the first time that's actually happened. We kind of struggled with a similar problem back in Locus, where our domain name was locus.sh, where the
Yeah.
sh was short for shipping, because
Mm.
whenever someone would search for locus or locus technology, or any of the alternatives, they would end up finding locus robotics, which was a
Okay.
much larger organization. So yeah, you need to figure out ways to ensure that you're differentiating your name, making sure that any mentions that you're getting has the entire entity name on it. What we've also tried to do is made, instead of going with something which is a little safe and enterprise AI, we've gone completely, the on the opposite end of the spectrum, where our identifier is actually a snail wearing a jetpack. So, and that's sort of become an extension of our identity. So some of these things have been helping, ensuring that, there are unique identifiers that we put along with the name, that's sort of helping with the search problem.
Got it. Got it. Yep. So yeah, we'll talk more about the marketing side of things, right? Things are changing pretty quick. Even before this episode, Raghav shown me a small application which he built himself inside the org. Yep. So yep, one of the things I'm seeing across the marketing leaders who are I spoke to in this podcast, right? So it's been like in I took a long 1 year break and started the podcast. I think you will be seventh or eighth guest after the break now. So I spoke to only marketing leader. They have this panic, Raghav. They are very much panic. Hey, things are changing. Hey, I used to write one article in a week before. Now you can write that in a day or less than that. Less than that is very much doable, right? But the quality of content varies. But like that is something we were discussing today. There is no taste or there is no expertise were plugged in that article. So yeah, if marketing playbook is changing, right? It's been changing for forever, right? Maybe I think around 5 years back, people start saying outbound is dying. Now it is getting more personalized. So I mean, yesterday I got a message from someone saying, "Hey, we connected few years back. Do I know this guy? Not at all. We connected in LinkedIn few years back. Okay. So what, right? I mean, that's how people personalizing. I know that doesn't make sense at all. But yeah, marketing playbook is changing. It was forever changing. What is really changing, Raghav, according to you? Because every company still outbound works, still SEO works, still I feel every channel is working for everyone at different places. It is up to the audience, right? So yeah, what is changing for you?
I think it's part of it is that, some of the older playbook where you wanted to kind of keep creating mass content just to kind of drive your SEO, some of that has sort of changed. So, part of the discovery layer has been eroding for a while. So the last 3 years, people are relying more and more on, your chat GPT and Claude and, basically relying on these LLMs to find information. So what has happened is that in a lot of cases, they have all the information that they want on you without ever visiting your website. So, sometimes gathering first party intent signals also becomes difficult. And secondly, you're creating a whole bunch of content, but it's not resulting in any sort of traffic anymore. So, I'm a part of a lot of these WhatsApp marketing leader groups. And there was this whole conversation, I think about 7 or 8 months ago, about how HubSpot's traffic is down almost 80-85% because they created so much content to just kind of drive inbound traffic, through search and whatever you wanted to look for, right? So anything related to marketing, they had content for it.
Yeah,
You
true.
you're looking for a PMM role, you have an article that,
Resumes,
yeah, resume
portfolio templates. Yeah.
exactly. Now you can just sort of feed in all your information on Plot and it'll give you like a nice clean resume. So you don't need any of those things anymore. So I think but having said that, some of the same principles that apply to SEO still apply when it comes to LLMs. The only difference is that it might not necessarily result in website traffic as such, but it will still mean that there is information that people are searching for. So now you want to start looking at how many citations that you're getting, what are the gaps in terms of your content and stuff like that. It I mean, PPC again, I think because search volumes are down, so it doesn't hold the same power that it did, let's say about 5 or 6 years ago, Google search, but search ads. But I think it's still something that you want to do as part of your hygiene, right? It's almost like this demand capture tax that you need to pay in order to, just make sure that yes, you have paid search ads that are running. Then LinkedIn has become a lot more relevant compared to, like, in terms of all the paid channels, especially in B2B marketing. It's still it's still the one channel that is still primary, especially when you're thinking about ABM and those kind of programs. But when you and coming to ABM, it's become even more important to make sure that you have a laser sharp focus on what your ICP is. So a lot of times what companies tend to do is that they start with ABM and then they feel like it's a way to kind of refine their ICP, when in fact it should be the other way around. You should have a laser sharp focus and then start focusing on specific accounts and things like that. What you can do is you can maybe have different prioritizations, create different segments, but not having a view on what your ICP is and then kind of using that as a discovery mechanism is not the best way to go about it. So I think in terms of, because the buying journey also, typically earlier it used to be, search, website visit, and then hopefully a form fill, and then you'd send them a bunch of, enroll them on your newsletter, and you'd send them a bunch of emails, hoping that they'd eventually become like an SQL. Everyone would celebrate, give high fives and stuff. That's changed now. So, it might be an opportunity without even ever visiting your website. They're probably, how they're doing the research or the discovery layer has changed. So now it's even like, before we started recording,
Record.
we were talking about how the role of the marketers also changed, right? So your planning windows become shorter. So earlier you could create an AOP and stick to it with minor adjustments after every quarter. Now you have weekly planning windows, and you have to sort of do weekly sprints and then figure out what's working, what's not, and keep changing things in real time. So it's almost like risk management and managing a portfolio of different channels, and then figuring out, okay, is this working or not? I'm spending this much on it. Maybe I want to readjust some of this budget, put it somewhere else. Oh, ChatGPT launched ads. Let me just, instead of using, putting it in Google,
Mm.
let me just try and put it in OpenAI, those things. So I think
Yeah.
that's sort of what's changed. And if someone said that they have a playbook for success right now, I think that just, yeah, yeah.
Interesting. What about MQLs? I know whenever I think about, okay, let's create a webinar for this, report for this, there is always this friction. Do people really care about that? Okay, that is end of the day MQL. I don't know whether they have intent to go forward. Can we just go behind or dial the people who visited the website or visited the high intent pages in the website? That is good enough signal for me to call them, right? Instead of me creating a report that might be relevant for them, or they might download it for just to read that, not to buy the product, right? So yeah, I mean, what about the MQLs?
So I think MQLs obviously has become more of a vanity metric than it used to be, but I wouldn't completely discount it. Creation of reports also, on the other hand, I think you can gate it, but I feel like ungating it also helps, and you need to figure out ways in which you can disseminate this information in other places, especially, and I think with citations, it's become even more important to have original research, or having first party data for creating reports and things like that. So in fact, when I was in CleverTap, we used to come up with these benchmark reports every quarter, and we used to gate these, but at the same time we used to run PR campaigns on these as well, where we would get insights on apps in a particular industry. So for example, one quarter would be travel apps, the next would be food delivery apps, and so on and so forth, right? And I think it's still important to come up with this sort of research, but not so much about around gating it, because this information is so much more easily available. Like anyone can just kind of use an LLM to come up with all of this. But it's still important to have this first party research, because it's what's going to help you with building your domain authority. It's what's going to help you with your citations. Then if you think about Google's EEAT signals as well, the first part is the expertise. And how do you show your expertise? By showing that you actually have experience working with customers, doing whatever you're talking about. And that's where some of the research has come from. So it's not just from surveys and that sort of stuff. So it's from actual user data that you have expertise in. This is how you kind of move the needle and so on. So that's what's still, I don't think there's still a replacement for that. But I think MQLs, just to kind of put gated content out there, it's more of a hygiene practice.
Got it.
But I think what's become important is to make sure that you're targeting the right people when you're doing
Right.
this as well. So
Right.
making sure that
Interesting.
whoever's seeing it, especially if you're putting money behind it, and if you're like, if you're not a mass product like ours, then it's important to have a very laser sharp focus on your target account list, and make sure that they are aware that you're actually doing all of this research, and you know doing organizing all of these, posting all of these webinars and events and things like that.
Hmm. Right. So what you're saying is leave the collecting emails part, but do write well research stuff. One of the things I used to think when when I got into B2B, right? Customers should believe that this company know what they're doing, right? So all these research are a proof for that, right? And one of the things I'm seeing that is working really well across is proprietary data. we at our company, we can do only certain things that you can't find on internet. That is only done by our platform. Such like you said, right? CleverTap. You will take the customer's data, mask it in a certain way, or put multiple data together and create a report. Yep, that really helps, right? That I mean, do create really good content, but need not to create that. That is something the takeaway here. Cool, right? So what about yeah? Essentially.
No, no, quite.
So what about customer advocacy, Raghav? That is something when, like we said, content can be fabricated, but research cannot be. That is kind of something I learned. So one of the things I feel is case studies and testimonials, especially video testimonials, right?
Absolutely.
Have enough G2 reviews. That is where you stand out. A company 1 month old can create a fantastic website, fabricate anything, say even they have 10 customers, but you can sense that easily when you get to the website.
Absolutely.
But having a video testimonial, having something verifiably human, right? That is something we spoke in the previous episode when I spoke to Stage marketing head. So, yep. What do you think about customer advocacy testimonials?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that topic because it's something I feel very passionately about. So, like at CleverTap, also the reason why I was hired at CleverTap is to kind of build a customer advocacy engine and build the customer marketing function. So, definitely, I think it's not something that you can make up. You can't just put up a case study, even if it's a written case study, right? You can't put up a case study with a made up testimonial of a customer with a photograph on it unless they've signed off on it or if it's validated data, and they will not sign off on a case study if they're not happy with what you've done. So I think yes, case studies are extremely important, and video case studies even more so. So in fact, we back in CleverTap as well. So there was a series that we kickstarted called Reimagine Growth. What we were trying to do was, there were a lot of companies that were, building mobile marketing platforms. Building mobile marketing platforms that were kind of sending push notifications that were focused on analytics and things like that. But everyone was talking about engagement. Everyone was talking about analytics. But it's more of a means to an end. So we said that okay, but the real goal is retention of those customers. The reason why you send those push notifications is to get that person, that user back to the app. So we started talking about how you should reimagine growth, not look at growth as a subset of just new user acquisition, but also the retention of those
Retention.
customers, because it's the retained users who are going to spend 5x more on your app, right? They're probably gonna, let's say if you're an OTT app, they're gonna upgrade, they're gonna add more people from their households and upgrade to a more expensive plan. It's those people who on an e-commerce app who are gonna continue coming back and buying more clothes or items and things like that. So in order to kind of drive home that fact, we actually identified some of our marquee customers in India and we did these videos. And I don't think the impact of some of those written case studies could even match the impact of those videos, and it's probably the best investment that we made. So initially I think internally it was not cheap, but it was definitely a great investment because of the kind of ROI that came with it. Because what also happens is that when you have a well produced video, it creates this sort of FOMO effect, and some of the other customers started asking us, when are you going to be doing our video with us
Oh,
next? So
nice.
we started getting inbound requests from our customers asking us to be featured in our videos.
Right.
So I think it's both. It's a great engagement exercise, retention exercise for your existing customers as well. But at the same time, because they're willing to come on camera and kind of talk about what you're doing and kind of sort of drive home some of your value prop, it's a lot more compelling for someone.
I mean, I just want to double click on your customer marketing things you have done at CleverTap. What are the
Yeah.
different things you've done there?
So different parts of it. So I think there was, I'd say I'd break it down into three parts. One piece was the thought leadership piece, right? Which is more of the content which is where the case studies come from, which is where you actually build these advocates to take them to different events where they share the stage with you or they speak on your behalf at events. right? So that's the thought leadership piece,
How it
which
works? Sorry to cut you, but how it works? I mean, do you pay them, or in what basis that relationship is taken?
yeah, so you don't have to pay them. Usually they so yeah, I mean actually let me start from the first two things and then
Okay,
probably get to the third piece. So
please,
the
please.
first piece is sort of building a customer advocacy engine where you look at who all are your existing customers. You try and find out which ones are your highest paying customers or the ones who are the happiest. You also try and find out the reasons why some of them are not happy. You interview them. So, one thing that I got wrong in the beginning, at least in CleverTap, was that I built like a referral engine without even speaking to customers. And that project actually tanked in the first 3 months,
Okay,
which is when I went back to the drawing board, spoke to our customers, tried to understand, okay, what is it that they're using? Why do they like CleverTap? Why do they dislike CleverTap? What is it that if they were to kind of refer someone, why would they do it, and why they wouldn't? Interestingly, what we also realized was when we spoke to these customers, they were using it for use cases that we never even imagined. So that
okay.
that fed into product marketing as well, because
Yeah,
each
yeah.
industry was using the product differently for different use cases. So that helped us a lot. And then eventually what we started doing was that we started using these customers for thought leadership. We started kind of, and we broke it down into three segments. So, and for the sake of simplicity, I would say L1, L2, L3.
Okay,
So the L1s are the CXOs, right? These are the people who are the executive sponsors. L2s are the people who are sort of the functional leads, let's say the head of growth, or the life cycle marketing heads or the CRM heads, and so on. And then at L3 are basically the individual contributors who are using the product on a day-to-day basis. So what we did was kind of mapped all of this out, figured out, okay, who's using the product, who's responsible for the reporting and everything, and who's sort of the executive sponsor. Created different programs for each. So for the L3s, it was around kind of knowledge sharing, getting these people to come, certification programs, things like that. With the
mm,
L2s, it was kind of helping, using them to kind of build content. So part of it was interviewing them, featuring them, sort of doing webinars with them, video interviews and things like that. So this would help them build their personal brand, and at the same time, they were also kind of invested in the CleverTap brand.
got it.
With the L3s, it was more of just kind of talking about what are some of the things that we're doing. That's where the reimagine growth piece kind of came in, where they're sort of talking about how they are ahead of the curve, ahead of the market, where everyone is talking about user acquisition, they're talking about retention. And that worked really well for us during, COVID and the recession also, because
Mm,
companies also had to slash their budgets. So they had to focus a lot more on retention and engaging their existing users. So that's where the CXO play, the L1 play kind of came in. Now, once you continue working with them, you want to make sure that they're engaged, you're kind of using them for different initiatives. That's how you get them to kind of start referring you as well. So we started building a referral program out of this. We started using them for, you know, helping us with ref checks with new prospects or customers, if they wanted to do a ref check. Let's say, for example, we're selling to a Hulu, which is a large
okay.
media streaming platform in the US. We'd get someone from a Hotstar to actually tell them how they're using the product, or someone from a Sony Live to tell them how they're using the product. So that's how it kind of compounded over time. So by the time, so I spent close to about a little over 2.5 years there, and by that
Awesome.
time we went from almost zero advocates to almost 200 plus
Mm.
advocates of the CleverTap brand, who
Advocates in three different levels.
at three different levels.
Yeah, got it. Got it.
So
So it
so
is more
L1 was
of.
probably the smallest bucket.
Mm.
Obviously, it
So
was most
you take them to the events or any such places, or who do you
yeah.
take to?
So when so depending on which region the event was in. So for example, if there is an event happening in Delhi, we would identify which are the customers who are in and around Delhi, getting them to kind of share the stage with us. If it's happening in, let's say, in Vegas or LA, we would try and find someone who's in and around LA and see if they can sort of come. We typically take care of the travel and the stay, but they would always be happy to kind of do it for free. So there was never like a component where you have to pay them to do it. We did try something like gamification of the engagement. program for the L1s and the L2s, but couldn't quite scale it initially. Where it was almost like a so if you engage with our content, we try and gamify it to so that they can earn points. And with those
Mm.
points, there's like a it's almost like a rewards store where they can exchange those points for merch and stuff like that. So that's something that we were trying to build, but we couldn't quite get to it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, I thought you will reward them charging them little less next time.
So
But
that
yeah,
is something that would work for the L1s, the L2s and L3s, obviously. So L2 still
yeah,
care because they would want to show that to their CXOs and the leadership team that they help save costs.
right.
The L3s obviously have different motivations. So
Got it.
yeah,
Yeah, interesting. I think we should do one episode completely about customer
yeah.
marketing. But I mean, it's more of customer education. When you spoke about L3, you were, making courses, certifications for them. But yeah, the way you utilize them and also help them, which is like across, right? I can't. It's just a part of customer success. Part of. I mean, I don't think you have any pipeline target for customer marketing team.
So when it started, there was no pipeline target associated with it. But I think initially the pipeline target was around sort of when I started working with CleverTap, it was a freemium offering. So there was a target around engaging some of the free users and try and convert them into paying customers. So
Got it.
there was that, but then eventually it sort of started moving more into like a revenue expansion kind of a role, which was shared with the customer success team. So even though you wouldn't like it was a lot harder to kind of it's the same thing with net new, right? With net new, you're always for marketing and sales are always at loggerheads for attribution. It was the same thing with this. So yeah, but I think there was part of it which was the influenced pipeline from existing customers. So
Right.
what we
Right.
started doing was using different tools for multi-touch attribution, trying to see what eventually led to like a cross sell or an upsell, and that's how it was sort of measured. But
Got it.
it was still a very clunky sort of a math.
Right. Interesting. I think where were you reporting? Are you reporting to the head of marketing or head of CS?
Head of market.
Got it. Cool. Yep. One question, then we'll jump to a game. Yep. So if Raghav is getting graduated in 2026, what will be the three advices for him?
So if Raghav was graduating in 2026, three advices. I think one would be read as much as possible, learn as much about the world around you as possible, and don't believe everything that any AI tells you, and try and use your better judgment.
Hmm.
So is
Hmm.
that did I cover it?
Yeah. Hmm. But I know when things are changing, I thought you would say, okay, get AI ready or something that sorts.
So I think AI ready is almost like table stakes, right? So if you're graduating in 2026, you're already using AI. I think using AI has become table stakes, but how do you use AI is more important. So when I think I probably need to double click on the being more aware of the world around you
Hmm.
part, where it's also about having ideas. So if there is something that you want to build, yeah, I think I would probably change the third one. Let's change
Okay.
the third one. Have like a builder first mentality. Don't think in
Hmm.
terms of silos.
Got it.
If you've studied literature, doesn't mean that you have to stick to literature. I have a literature grad in my team who's actually leading performance marketing.
Awesome.
So right, so it's not just about that. Have a builder first mentality, because now like it's super easy to build anything on your own. You just
Got it.
need to have the right ideas.
Yeah.
So
You should
yeah,
have the intent. You will find anything, right? Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. So we'll get into the game. Yeah. Are you excited, Raghav? I'm trying to do it in what is that? What do you call that? Shows in TVs. What do you call them?
those yeah, well, those segments, those game show
No,
segments,
no. What do we call that? Shows? Some kind of shows, right? Reality TV shows. Or
reality TV.
reality shows. Yeah. I'm trying to
Yeah.
make it like a reality show. Right? Are you excited, Raghav?
Yes, let's do this.
Okay. Yep. Here we are. So, yes, smash our pause. The word
Agentic.
agentic.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. I'm gonna get crucified for saying this, considering I'm in this space. Well, say pass. And let me just give a caveat here. So if you go
Okay.
to any event, anyone
Hmm.
that has any, like, even if like a little chatbot in the bottom right corner of their product, they're calling themselves agentic these days. It's a sea of sameness. Any event, everyone's an agentic AI, agentic solution,
Agent.
agentic whatever, right? So okay, gated content, trade your email for a PDF. Okay, pass. Smash.
Smash. Why that? I'm finding a lot of slop in LinkedIn now.
Yeah, so I think again a call out here. It's 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 important to make sure that it's actually again sharing a real point of view. So in fact, it can't be just random stuff of you putting a picture of yourself in Bali and writing something
So,
completely unrelated. But when I think about founder-led brands, I'm thinking of folks like Adam Robinson, who actually has a real point of view, or Amanda Zhu. So there are a lot of folks who are actually doing a really good job of founder-led posting. And if you really have something great to say, I think people are still reading through it. It's still getting engagement, right? Okay, webinars. Register now, attend never. I still feel like there's merit to doing webinars. So I mean, even if you're not attending, people are still sending their note takers, or waiting for summaries. So I'd still say smash.
awesome.
Marketing qualified by who? Okay, pass. I still, yeah, okay. Attribution, UTM tracking. Okay, this is a tough one. This is a tough one. I mean, it's not a hard smash or a hard pass. So I'm gonna say, yeah, let's just put
Take
smash
sides.
before, till we get something better. Yeah. Okay. Lead scoring, 10 points for, if it is just from the context of this lead scoring, not so much. I would I would probably say smash if it also has, let's say, some form of intent data, or like if you're taking some of
Yeah,
those.
imagine if you plug in tools like any D on tool, right? Which page they visited on the website. There also
Yeah,
you can score the lead.
yeah, I'd still say somewhat smash. Yeah, yeah, I'd still say smash. Not the traditional lead scoring model that we used to follow like 10 years ago. It's, yeah, let's go with smash for now. Yeah. In the space that I'm in, I'd still say smash, but it's not for everyone. Email or newsletters, yeah, I'd say smash, but not not the typical. So again, a call out here, not the kinds where you're sort of sharing just your generic posts every week, like multiple posts and like those different, yeah, what are those different blocks. But
Hmm.
I think newsletters where you have a real point of view. I think when you're thinking about product, one of our biggest one of the biggest engagement tools for our existing customers is the newsletters, where we share the product sprints and what we've done in the past week or the past fortnight, that sort of a thing. So I'd still say
Wow.
smash,
Smash.
but depends on what your audience is.
The new thing coming in.
Creator, influencer marketing, is more, I'd say, if the goal is pipeline generation, then I would probably say pass for
Okay.
now. It's it's still, I mean, I it's good for signaling, but I think creator, influencer marketing in B2B, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Pipeline, no. Like you said, it's more of awareness channel here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If the
So
ticket size is more, high, you can't
yeah, if
expect.
you yeah, if you're an early stage startup, you want to use that as an anchor, sure. If you're going after influencers in B2B, it's a tricky one. But yeah, if there's a certain level of maturity, I'd say sure, smash. Depends on I I gauge people on things like this, on judgment, but I'd say pass if it's on the JD, but smash if it's smash smash in terms of you not calling it out.
Okay.
So I don't
Okay.
know what. Okay, let's just yeah, but I'd say pass if it's spelled out on a JD. That means you
Okay.
probably don't have taste either.
Mm.
Customer smash. Yeah. Category creation.
Tough one.
I'm doing that right now. It's exhausting. It's not for everyone. If you can, pass. Not saying
So
that you shouldn't, but if you can avoid it, don't just try and create a category if because it sounds glamorous. Do it if it's really, you know, addressing a need that doesn't isn't addressed yet. So I'd say for generally, do a check. But yeah, if you have a choice, pass. If you don't, then smash. So let's go with pass for the general public.
okay, I got it.
Yeah. The CMO title, man, pass.
Why is that, Raghav? I mean,
I mean, so the thing is, I mean, it sounds glamorous, but it's exhausting. It's yeah. Oh man, personalization at scale. If it's the personalization at scale, I'll I just got a message on LinkedIn. Someone sent me a connection request. I accepted it. I got a message saying that, hey, your viewpoint on AI not driving results was spot on. We build AI to to reduce your workload. Would you like to have a chat? I was like, that's not connected at all.
yeah,
And
at all. At,
so yeah, so personalization at scale, the quote unquote personalization, pass.
awesome. Yep. With this,
Oh
we
man,
have smashed a lot. But cool. 8, 8, and 7. Interesting.
yeah, interesting.
Cool. Yep. I think I'll stop sharing. Yep. Nice playing that. I think we could have spoken more or maybe get on detail about category creation and customer advocacy. That is something I'm regretting now.
That's okay.
I don't want to, yeah, drag this to another 30 minutes. But yeah, I mean, great chatting with you, Raghav.
Likewise, man. Likewise, really enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I'm like this was super fun. So if and I can go on and on about all of these things. So if you want to have a chat, otherwise outside of the podcast, also have a chat.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks.